In the heart of Umyuk village, where the crimson sun sank behind the palm trees and the sound of the talking drums carried secrets through the night, there lived a woman named Oluoma, known for her beauty and her sorrow. She was married to Chike, a humble farmer whose love for her was deep, but whose heart was often troubled by their empty compound after 7 years of marriage. Her womb had refused to bring forth life. The women in the market whispered behind her back, saying she had angered the gods, or perhaps inherited a barren spirit from her mother. Desperate to silence the shame, Oluoma spent her nights before the ancient shrine of Allah, goddess of the earth, begging for mercy. One moonless night, as she poured libation of palm wine onto the sacred ground, a cold wind stirred the leaves, and a strange voice spoke from the darkness. Oluoma, your tears have reached the depths of the earth, but the price of life is not without blood. Terrified, she turned to run, but her feet felt rooted to the soil. The next morning, she awoke at the shrine, her body trembling, her wrapper torn, and a strange warmth pulsing within her belly. When she returned home, Chike rejoiced at her swollen stomach, believing their prayers had finally been answered. But the old midwife, Mama Nena, who had seen too many births in her time, frowned deeply. This child, she muttered, touching Oluoma's belly, does not kick like others. There is power here, dark and restless. Oluoma tried to ignore the warning, holding on to faith that the gods had blessed her at last. But soon, strange things began to happen. The goats bleated at night, as if chased by unseen shadows. Her clay water pot cracked each dawn without reason, and she dreamt of a child with eyes like burning coal calling her mother. As her belly grew, the village grew fearful. The priest of the shrine came to visit, sprinkling ash and drawing symbols on her doorway, saying, "The spirit that touched you was not of Isla, but of the forgotten ones beneath her. You carry what should not be born." Chike, torn between love and fear, demanded to know what had happened that night at the shrine. But Oluoma could not speak, was as though something inside her forbade it. By the 8th month, she could barely walk. Her eyes dimmed, and her laughter vanished. The night of her labor came with a thunderstorm that shook the heavens. No midwife dared approach, for lightning struck any who came near. Alone, screaming beneath the roar of the storm, Oluoma gave birth to a child whose cries silenced the rain and whose skin glowed faintly in the dark. When Chike entered the hut, he froze. The child's eyes were open, unblinking, and its tiny hand clutched a strand of black hair that was not its own. From that night, nothing in Umyuk was the same. The crops withered, the river turned muddy, and every new baby born afterward carried a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon. The elders gathered in fear, whispering that Oluoma had brought a curse upon them, that the child was not of man or God, but something in between. And though Chike tried to defend her, even he could not ignore the dread that crept into his soul whenever the infant smiled. The days that followed the child's birth were heavy with silence, the kind that pressed on the chest and made breathing feel like sin. Oluoma named the baby Obimna, meaning "my heart knows," though the villagers whispered darker names, Chwa Muo, the spirit's child, or the unborn born. Every dawn, the baby's cries echoed through the compound like a haunting song, and strange things accompanied his wails. Palm fronds would sway without wind, birds would fall from trees, and dogs would howl until their throats ran dry. Mama Nena, the old midwife, refused to visit again, muttering that the child's umbilical cord had turned black before she could cut it, a sign of unclean birth. Oluoma, pale and weak, clung to her child with trembling arms, whispering lullabies through tears, even as fear grew in her heart. Chike, once proud, now walked like a shadow, avoiding the villagers' eyes. Men spat on the ground when he passed. Women pulled their children close, and the priest of Ayla refused their offerings, declaring that no blessing could dwell where a curse had taken root. Bury the child, some elders said. Leave it at the forest shrine where such things belong. But Chike could not bring himself to do it. He bears my blood, he argued, though deep inside he wasn't sure if that was true. On the 7th night, Oluoma awoke to find Obimna gone from her mat. Her scream tore through the night like thunder. Chike and the neighbors rushed in with torches, searching every corner until they saw faint footprints leading toward the forest, glowing faintly in the mud. They followed, trembling, until they reached the sacred tree of Odo, the spirit of return. There, sitting at its base, was Obimna, unharmed and smiling, holding a dead bird in his tiny hand. The bird's feathers had turned white, as though drained of all color. Chike snatched the child and ran home, his mind spiraling with terror. That night, he went to consult Debia Okor, the most feared spiritual man in 3 villages. The Debia listened quietly, then threw his cowrie shells on the ground. When they landed, all face downward, sign of death. Your wife made a pact, Okor said grimly. She went to the shrine alone, and what answered her was not Ayla. That child is born of shadow and desire. To save this land, it must be returned to the one who gave it. Chike's hands shook. Returned? You mean killed? The Debia's gaze was cold. Returned, he repeated. Chike left with heavy steps, torn between the fear of his people and the love he still bore for Uluoma. But when he returned home, he found her sitting in the dark, cradling Obimna, whispering. He spoke to me again. He said his father comes soon. Her voice was distant, her eyes unfocused, and her hair hung wild around her face. That night, the moon refused to rise, and a faint humming came from the direction of the shrine like 1,000 voices calling in unison. The goats broke their tethers, the hens flew from their perches, and Chike knew then that something had begun that no man could stop. He tried to take the child away, but Oluoma's grip was iron. Her voice no longer her own. If he dies, we all die. Before dawn, lightning struck the tree at the edge of the village, splitting it in 2, and when the villagers came running, they saw the mark of a serpent carved deep into its heart. The fear in Umuk grew like wildfire after the lightning struck the serpent-marked tree, for the villagers believed that the gods had sent a sign that the curse carried by Oluoma's child had now awakened something older and hungrier. Days turned to weeks, and still the air around their hut felt wrong, heavy with unseen eyes. Oluoma no longer joined the women at the stream. She stayed inside, her once radiant skin now pale as ash, whispering songs to Obimna that no one had ever heard before, songs in a tongue even the oldest elders did not recognize. Chike, broken by sleepless nights, wandered the village seeking help. But every Debia he visited refused, saying the spirits around his home were too powerful to challenge. There are some battles, Debia Okor told him gravely, that even the gods step aside from. One afternoon, The chief's son Obina, a proud hunter who mocked all talk of spirits, passed by Oluoma's hut and heard the child crying. Against warnings he entered, calling out, "Woman, silence that child before I." His words froze. In the dim light he saw Obimna sitting upright on the mat, staring at him with eyes that gleamed red like burning charcoal. The hunter stumbled backward, dropping his spear, as the baby's laughter echoed low, mocking, ancient. He fled into the street, screaming that the child was not human, that its gaze had burned his mind. When the villagers found him later, he sat at the market square muttering, "The child knows me. He calls me brother." By nightfall, he was dead, his face twisted in terror. That death broke the last thread of patience the village had. The elders gathered beneath the Iroko tree, drumming in rage and fear. "This must end," cried Chief Udo. "No child, no woman is worth our ruin." A meeting was held, and it was decided that at the next full moon, the mother and her child would be taken to the forest and offered to the gods as atonement. When Chaik heard this, he collapsed to his knees, begging for mercy. But the elders turned away, saying, "She brought this upon herself." That night, he rushed home, desperate to flee with Oluoma and the child. But she was sitting by the doorway, already waiting for him, as if she had known. "We cannot run," she said softly. "He will find us wherever we go." Her voice trembled, yet her eyes glowed faintly in the dark, and Chaik realized with horror that she was no longer fully herself. "Who are you?" he whispered. She smiled, sad, distant smile. "I am the woman who begged for life, and I am the one who must now pay." The full moon rose bright and swollen like a watchful eye, casting silver light over the forest. The villagers came with ropes and torches, chanting the old songs of cleansing. Oluoma did not resist as they bound her hands. She only held her child close and whispered, "Forgive me." When they reached the forest's heart, Debia Okor began the ritual, drawing symbols in ash and blood, calling on Ayla to reclaim what was hers. But as the drums reached their final beat, a wind, unlike any they had felt before, swept through the clearing, extinguishing every torch at once. Darkness swallowed them whole. From the blackness came a voice deep, echoing, and everywhere at once, "You cannot return what was never yours." The earth split open beneath the shrine stone, and a burst of red light erupted, throwing the villagers to the ground. When it faded, Oluoma and the child were gone. Only her wrapper remained, fluttering in the dust, and the sound of a baby crying echoed faintly before being swallowed by silence. The people fled in terror, leaving the forest behind, never to enter again. When dawn broke over Umuk, after that dreadful night, the forest stood eerily silent. But the villagers knew something terrible had taken place beyond mortal understanding. The air smelled of burnt earth, and though the sky was clear, a faint red haze lingered over the trees. 4 days, no birds sang, and the hunters who ventured near the forest's edge returned, trembling, swearing they had heard a woman's lullaby floating through the mist. The elders forbade anyone from going near, declaring it a forbidden ground. Chaik, grief-stricken and hollow-eyed, refused to believe Oluoma and Obimna were gone. He wandered to the shrine every evening, calling their names, leaving food and water, hoping they would return. Then one night, as the moon rose pale and thin, he heard a baby's cry from the forest. Without thinking, he followed the sound, pushing through the underbrush until he came upon the old tree that lightning had once split. There, glowing faintly at its base, sat a small clay pot covered in red cloth. As he approached, the cloth shifted on its own, and a soft voice whispered, "You shouldn't have come." His blood froze. It was Oluoma's voice. With trembling hands, he lifted the cloth, and inside he saw Obimna, still an infant, sleeping peacefully. But his reflection appeared in the pot's surface not. Panic seized him, and he stumbled backward. The forest rustled as a figure emerged from the mist. Oluoma, her eyes dark as midnight. She looked unchanged, yet there was no warmth in her face. "I begged them to let me stay," she said softly, "but the child belongs to neither the living nor the dead. They bound us here." Chike fell to his knees. "Then let me take you home." She shook her head. "Home is no longer a place for us." Her hand brushed his cheek, cold as river stone. "Leave before the forest remembers you." But he could not. Tears streamed down his face as he held her, begging forgiveness. Suddenly, the wind roared, and from behind her, hundreds of faint lights appeared, faces of the unborn. Spirits of those lost to forgotten rituals. "They come for what was promised," she whispered, clutching the pot. The ground quaked as the spirits swirled around them, and the ancient tree groaned as if alive. Chike tried to pull her away, but she placed the pot in his hands. "Take him far away. Raise him as yours. Let his curse die with you." Before he could reply, a bright flame shot up between them, and the spirits screamed, dragging her into the earth's depths. Chike stumbled backward, clutching the pot, and when he looked again, the forest was still. The pot was warm, but the child inside was gone. Only ashes remained. He collapsed, broken, and when the villagers found him the next morning, he was sitting at the forest's edge, silent, his hair turned white overnight. He never spoke again, only sat each night staring at the tree line, listening to the wind for her voice. Years passed, and the story of Oluoma became a warning whispered to young women who sought forbidden blessings. The forest was renamed Ani Enisotha, sacred, forbidden land. No one dared enter it again. Yet, on nights when the wind howled through the village, mothers would hold their children close, for deep within the forest, faint cries could still be heard, soft, rhythmic, and haunting the sound of a woman singing her cursed child to sleep. Years turned into decades, and the tale of Oluoma faded from the lips of the old and curious into a whispered myth told only by moonlight. The forest of Ani Enso grew thicker, darker, and so sacred. Children were warned that any who spoke the name Oluoma beneath the new moon would draw her spirit's attention. Yet time, as always, dulled fear. A new generation arose, one that mocked the tales of their ancestors, calling them old women's dreams. Among them was Namdi, a bold young man who had grown weary of living under invisible laws. "If the forest is cursed," he told his friends, "then let me see it myself." One fateful night, when the moon hung low and the crickets fell silent, he slipped past the village boundary with nothing but a torch and a charm his mother had forced upon him. The forest greeted him not with sound but with an unnatural quiet, as though holding its breath. His torch flickered, though there was no wind. He pressed on until he reached the clearing where the sacred tree stood. Now massive and twisted, its trunk split wide open like a mouth. Within its hollow, something glimmered, faintly, a clay pot wrapped in faded red cloth. Namdi's heart pounded, for every child of Umak knew that pot by description alone. He reached out, laughing nervously. So, this is the curse that frightened generations. The moment his fingers brushed the pot, the ground shivered, and the forest sighed as if awakening from a long sleep. The pot cracked, releasing a faint wealtha sound of a newborn crying. Namdi stumbled back, terror in his eyes, as mist poured from the crack, forming the shape of a woman cradling a child. Her face was half light, half shadow, and when she spoke, her voice carried both love and agony. "Why did you wake me?" Namdi tried to run, but roots rose from the ground, coiling around his legs. The spirit floated closer, her dark hair drifting like smoke. "He slept," she whispered. "He dreamed without pain. And now you have called him." From the broken pot rose another shape, the form of a small boy with hollow eyes. He turned toward the forest, and suddenly the trees began to sway violently, bending as if in worship. The cries of countless spirits filled the night, echoing across the land. Back in the village, elders woke in horror, feeling the air change. "She has returned," one gasped. Torches were lit, drums beaten, and the priest hurried to the forest with the sacred staff once used by Father Chakwu generations ago. But when they arrived, they found Namdi kneeling before the spirits, eyes glowing red, his voice blending with theirs as he chanted words no human tongue should know. The priest raised the staff high, calling on Allah to seal the curse once more, but the ground opened before him, and from its depths came Oluoma's voice, soft, weary, yet filled with power. "I begged for mercy, and mercy was denied. So now, let all remember my pain." A blinding light erupted, swallowing the clearing, and when it faded, the forest was gone, burned to ashes, and in its place stood a vast lake, dark and still, reflecting the moon like a single unblinking eye. The villagers fell to their knees, weeping, knowing the curse had changed but not vanished. They named the lake Miri Oluoma, the tears of Oluoma, and built no shrine near it, for it needed none. To this day, elders say that when the wind passes over its surface, you can hear a woman singing to her child, promising him peace the world never gave. Some nights, fishermen claim to see a faint red glow beneath the water, and a soft hand brushing the waves. They drop their nets, whisper a prayer, and flee before dawn, for they know the curse of Oluoma was never truly lifted, only passed from land to legend.